Welcome to In Your Defense, Galveston and Beyond.
Welcome to Defense on the Coast with Mark Diaz, a passionate criminal defense attorney with over 25 years of experience defending the rights of Texans. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and I'm excited to discuss all things criminal defense law today. Mark, great to see you again.
Great having me again. Thank you.
So today we're going to talk about serious felony DWI. We're going to go over it kind of from arrest to resolution. So how common are drunk driving arrests in and around Galveston, Texas?
They're very common. But because we're an island, we get a lot of tourism. So, for instance, this weekend is the biker rally, which is huge. And whenever you have a large portion of the population here for an event, they'll spike, right? And usually track them, and I'll look like Monday after the event's over, and I'll see how many DWI arrests were made over the weekend. Obviously, on a weekend like this, it's going to typically be higher. Same thing like spring break, any major event, and the arrests spike, not just in DWI, but they do in DWI. The other reason for that is on major holidays, they put out a DWI task force looking for DWI offenses.
Yeah, it makes sense. The police know that as well as you do that there's going to be a lot more people driving drunk during events.
I stay home.
Yeah, good move. Can you explain the levels of seriousness between the misdemeanor and felony DWI charges in Texas?
The biggest things are going to be obviously the range of punishment. A felony is going to carry the possibility of prison time. Depending upon if it's your third or more, you could be looking at prison time. Whereas the misdemeanor, that's not going to happen. In fact, it's rare that people do jail time as a result of a misdemeanor DWI. It's typically probation or sometimes a fine. There's lots of things you can do in misdemeanor court. Whereas in felony court, the possibility of getting prison time is the scariest thing for most people. And then, of course, becoming a convicted felon because of the collateral effects that can have on employability, those types of things. So the biggest difference is going to be the range of punishment that you're talking about. But as far as the elements of defending the case, there's not a lot of difference. Obviously, sometimes in a felony DWI trial, we worry about the jury. Since they're in felony court, they're in district court, we're worried that they're inherently going to know that it's not the first, right?
Right.
Because they're not told that up front. But yeah, the biggest thing is the range of punishment that you're facing for each one. But defending them is basically the same. There's some exceptions, like sometimes people get charged with a third, which would be a felony. And then I find out that number 2 DWI was like in Louisiana, and the state can't find the judgment and they can't prove it. And so then I can get it knocked back down to a misdemeanor. But
all right, so there's a lot of differing opinions on whether you should do field sobriety tests or whether you should blow into the breathalyzer when you get pulled over. What do you generally tell people as far as what you should and shouldn't do if you're pulled over?
If you've had alcohol, do not do any of it. So for instance, let's say you're doing them outside in the elements. You're nervous because we all get nervous when we get pulled over. So do I. Sure. At this point, you know that they think you've been drinking. That's on your mind. There's just almost no way to do well on those tests. So yeah, for me, I would say don't do them. Same thing with blood and breath. Unless you're absolutely certain you haven't had anything to drink, if you volunteer to give those tests, you're taking away things I can challenge. To take and we don't see a lot of breath cases anymore. It's mostly blood these days. The officer has to articulate to a judge a reasonable or probable cause why he wants that judge to sign a warrant to get your blood. That's if you don't volunteer. That's something I can challenge, right? And we've caught officers, it's human nature, but it's very obvious they cut and pasted from a previous one. And then when we watch the video, it doesn't add up with what they said. And so we've been able to successfully challenge them. But if you just say, okay, I'll just go ahead and give you my blood, you've taken that challenge away from me. And so unless you haven't consumed any alcohol, again, I would say refuse. Because and we have to educate juries on this a lot, it's not illegal to drink and drive. Meaning, if you go out to dinner and you have a glass of wine and then drive home, you haven't broken any law, right? It's in the state of Texas, if your blood is above a 0.08 alcohol content, or if you've lost the normal use of your mental and physical faculties due to alcohol consumption, then you're fine, right? So, I don't know how else to say it.
So you're saying, like, just out of curiosity, in that scenario, you went out to dinner, you had a glass of wine, that was it, and you get pulled over and they want you to do a roadside test. I wouldn't blow over 0.08 with one glass of wine.
Correct.
So would you still say I shouldn't do it?
Well, this is what's going to happen. Are you talking blood or breath?
Well, you said it's more blood these days, so maybe I would just go with blood.
So here's the problem. You're still going to jail, and you're still going to wait several months to get those blood results. So why take away the possibility that I have something else to challenge? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Either way, You're still getting your license taken away and all that.
Right. So I would rather you just say no and make them get a warrant, and then we have another area to fight.
Okay.
Because look, realistically, DWI defenses and investigations are very involved. When we start the analysis, we have to start with the reason for the stop. And then there's so much more, right? Even the field sobriety tests, the officers have to be trained and certified to administer them, right? So Thomas, one of the attorneys here in my office, has been to that training and certification. And I don't mean one similar to officers. I mean, he was the only civilian in the course. All the others were law enforcement officers. And the reason is because everything is supposed to be performed in a certain way. So Thomas can look at a video recording of the field sobriety tests and tell me instantly what the officer did wrong or what the officer said wrong by giving the instructions. It's highly technical. And then you also have to realize, and this is kind of funny, I've been trying DWIs since before we had video of it. Right now, everybody's got a body cam. The car has a dash cam. When I started, we didn't have all that. Shortly after, we got it was back, on VCR tapes, the patrol cars started having cameras, so they would always line the defendant up in front of the patrol car and do everything. But it's gotten much more technologically advanced now. And with that, we have so much more regulation. For instance, there's a mandatory waiting period that they have to observe you before they can take your blood or breath. That's to make sure that you haven't ingested anything, you haven't burped, just a number of things, right? And again, we've found on video where they said they did the mandatory waiting period and they didn't. So a DWI can become very technical. Same thing, we had a case, they take your blood and the blood is supposed to be logged and stored at a certain temperature and all these things. We once had a case where we found out the officer had been driving around with the vials of blood in the trunk of his patrol car for 2 weeks. So they're very involved and we have to go into everything we can find to make sure whether or not the state can make their case.
So what happens to a person's driver's license after an arrest? And then what happens if they're convicted?
After the arrest, they're supposed to confiscate your driver's license and give you a form. It's called the DIC form, and it explains to you what's going to happen to your driver's license, right? And basically, it gives you a time period to request a hearing challenging the suspension of your license. If you don't, then your license will automatically become suspended, and the time periods change depending upon whether you blew or whether they got blood, the level of how high over you were. But most of the DWIs that we handle hire us right after they get arrested. We challenge the suspension of the license, and we're actually able to be pretty successful at beating a lot of them, so our client's license does not get suspended. That's after arrest. Okay. Right. The other important thing about challenging the suspension is that just by requesting the hearing, many times kicks it out several months. And so even if you ultimately do get suspended, you have much more time to prepare. Some people want an occupational license that we have to get, and there's things we can do. As far as conviction, it changes, right? Whether it's first, second, but generally speaking, if you take probation, you do not get a suspension. If you take jail time, you do get a suspension. And when I say jail time, there are a lot of people that we represent because of their circumstances in life, be it employment, be it whatever. They don't want probation. And so we get them basically what amounts to time served, meaning your jail time is the time you were in jail before you bonded out, but now you're going to pay a fine of X, right? We negotiate that. For the people that do that, there is a suspension along with a statutory $3,000 fine. A lot of times we can get courts to waive that fine, but there's an automatic suspension for taking the conviction. But again, some people would rather take the conviction than get an occupational license rather than be on probation, because if you do something to upset the court and you're on an occupational license, all they can do is take away your license. They can't jail you. And so some people say, I'd rather be in that situation than be on probation. And if something happens, I'm going to jail. Or some people, because of work, because of travel, they just don't want to be on probation. So that's unique to every client.
Right. How important is it for someone to get to you quickly if they need representation?
Well, it's important so that I can also fight for your license. So that means you want to hire me within 15 days of getting arrested, so I can do what I need to do.
And do people tend to do that, or do they wait too long and then it starts getting more complicated in your experience?
The majority of our clients do hire us within the time period.
Oh, that's good. That's good. It makes your job a lot easier.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
How do you feel about, civilian dash cams? Do you feel people should have them? Does that help you a lot of times?
Not yet had a case where the civilian dash cam had an impact.
Really?
But I am interested in them, right? Just like everybody else. I watch all the reels and the TikToks and everything else of wild stuff happening on people's dash cams. But I have not had one that was criminal evidence yet.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
It's coming. I mean, for sure. But we're not there yet. Not here, at least.
Yeah, I know. I know a few people who have one, but admittedly, I don't know a ton of people who've put one in yet.
I mean, I haven't, only because I sit there and I think, I've never seen nothing exciting in front of me. You know what I mean?
The only thing I see is some witty bumper stickers.
Right. I never see anything that I was like, ooh, I wish I had that on dash cam. But it's coming. I mean, it's like every other auto accessory. Eventually, it's going to come as an option on the car. I mean,
right.
I'm sure. Yeah. I've been saying for a long time, I won't be surprised when they legislate that you have to get a smart start in your car purchase. But I don't know. When I say smart start, I mean, you have to blow, and if you're above a 0.08, your car won't start.
Oh, okay. So you're saying everybody would have to do that.
I'm saying I won't be shocked if
that'd be crazy.
It would be. But if you think about it, so they're required on a lot of bonds. Well, all of our courts will do it on above a 0.15 blood alcohol level, but it's just becoming. So in the beginning, it was very rare for anyone to get one. Now we have a lot of people with them. And sometimes it becomes a problem, especially for someone who drives a company vehicle and whatnot. But yeah, I won't be shocked if it gets to that point where every new vehicle has a smart start installed. But I don't know.
Let's hope not, Mark.
Oh, I agree. But I'm saying it's just like I think someday I'm going to be buying a new truck and they're going to say, oh, and it has the dash cam already in it.
And it drives itself. You just sit in the back.
Right.
All right. Well, good stuff. Thank you for joining us on Defense on the Coast with Texas criminal defense attorney Mark Diaz. To connect with Mark, you can visit texascriminaljustice.com. Also, please like and subscribe our channel and leave a review if you liked what you heard. Mark, always good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.